Welcome, everyone. Thanks to all of you who are attending our virtual panel discussion as we launch the Freedom and Justice Campaign, SB1437, and the fight to get free from mass incarceration. Presented by Asian Solidarity Collective and Pillars of the Community. My name is Kevin, and I am a member of the ASC Action Committee, and nervous and also glad to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren, and I am a member of the ASC Political Education Committee. We will begin with acknowledging that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Indigenous people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations, including where we currently reside in occupied Kumeyaay territory in San Diego. We are excited to host this virtual panel discussion today and to launch the Freedom and Justice Campaign, a solidarity and collaborative effort between Asian Solidarity Collective and Pillars of the Community.
We would like to start by lifting up the work of our organizations collaborating for this event. First off is Pillars of the Community, which is committed to embracing and celebrating the historic, rich, and diverse culture of Southeast San Diego. They strive to counter the criminalization of our community through community organizing, leadership development, and strategic partnerships. Their vision is for a healthy and thriving Southeast San Diego, which reflects the rich and diverse culture of all its members.
Asian Solidarity Collective is a grassroots organization in San Diego whose mission is to activate Asian American social justice consciousness, condemn anti-Blackness, and build Asian solidarity with Black folks, queer and trans people of color, and other oppressed communities. We have been actively organizing since our inception in 2016.
This event was made possible by members of ASC's Action and Political Ed Committee, Pillars of the Community, and other community members. The planning subcommittee who coordinated this event are Stacy, Timmy, Lauren, May, Candy, Piggy, and myself. And we would also like to give props to those who are providing support for this event, including moderators, Candy and Kim, chat monitors Pebbles, Mela, and Quay, slide deck Stacy, timekeeper Diana, and my fellow readers Lauren and Timmy. We also want to lift up our ASL interpreters, Leah Aviles, Jessica Tinoco, and captioner Darren Hollifield, who are providing the accessibility services for today. We're also appreciative of Melissa Calibri, who supported and coordinated accessibility for this event. This also serves as a reminder for all participants who will be speaking today to take pauses and pace your talk for ASL interpreters, captioning, and other accessibility needs.
The Freedom and Justice Campaign is a solidarity, collaborative effort organized by Pillars of the Community and Asian Solidarity Collective, working alongside people currently and/or formerly incarcerated. Freedom and Justice seeks to challenge the stall tactics by San Diego's district attorney and judges regarding Senate Bill 1437, a law designed to only charge those who intended to kill or had a direct role in a murder with felony murder charges. SB 1437 was needed because previous laws allowed anyone present or mildly involved to be prosecuted with felony murder, which had devastating effects on Black, Brown, Indigenous, and people of color communities. Many BIPOC peoples have been unjustly convicted of murder and are eligible to get their cases reviewed under SB 1437. Since the passing of SB 1437, those previously convicted under the felony murder rule can petition for resentencing. Freedom and Justice aims to amplify the stories of those impacted by an unjust system and expose the ways in which the carceral state denies the freedom of those most impacted as we fight to bring them home. Our goals for the Freedom and Justice campaign are to, 1, amplify the stories of people currently incarcerated who should be released under SB 1437, 2, create awareness about SB 1437, and 3, demand DA Summer Stephan and San Diego judges follow the laws. Now we would like to introduce ASC member and one of our panelists today, Timmy, to share more information about SB 1437 and the felony murder rule.
Senate Bill 1437 was enacted in January of 2019. It's a bill that made changes to the felony murder rule and the natural and probable consequences doctrine. So non-killers and those without the intent to kill or reckless indifferences can no longer be charged with murder. The felony murder rule is a person who did not kill or did not have intent to kill or was not a major participant in reckless indifferences to human life can no longer be sentenced to murder for participating in underlying felony. The natural probable consequences doctrine is a person can no longer be charged for aiding and abetting murder under this doctrine. So what that means is if you get into a fight, you can't get charged for murder if your friend kills somebody because you didn't know that they had the intent to kill. Prior to SB 1437, under these rules, many BIPOC people were unjustly convicted of murder and given life sentences. We are now able to restore justice by giving back life to the people who have been sentenced to spend their lives in prison for a crime that they did not commit. Since the passing of SB 1437, we can now get closer to freeing those most impacted by the carceral state as we fight in solidarity to bring them home.
Now we want to lift up the stories of just 4 of our incarcerated community members. Konesavanh Donald Sirypangno, Brian Mason, Isidro Vasquez, and Terrance Nowden. Konesavanh Donald Sirypangno is a father, brother, husband, and a son. He dreams of becoming a chef so he can connect and inspire others through food. He's currently serving a life sentence for a crime that he didn't even commit. His family is waiting and praying for his return so he can fulfill his dreams. On the evening of June 15th, 2005, Donald attended a party that would forever impact his life and the lives of many others. That night, a fight broke out between Donald, his friends, and other partygoers. Although Donald was not injured during the fight, others were hurt. One person was tragically killed by a gunshot fired by Donald's friend. Donald and his friends were arrested shortly after, and Donald was charged with first-degree attempted murder, and gang-motivated battery. Donald was charged with first-degree murder for being engaged in the fight, even though he had no part in his friend's choice to pull the trigger. He is currently serving a life sentence for an act he didn't even commit. The courts have finally reduced his charge of first-degree murder to second-degree murder. On March 19, 2019, Donald filed for 1170 in SB1437, which propels his case to potentially be reviewed with a possibility to release him, since he was not the shooter and didn't know that his friend had an intent to kill. However, the San Diego County District Attorney and courts have been using stall tactics to avoid scheduling for him for a hearing. The system has been using racist laws and practices to keep BIPOC people, including Donald, locked away for life on crimes they didn't even commit. Cases like Donald's must be heard and amplified. Donald must be allowed to go home to his family. He has already served 15 years. He shouldn't be serving life for a murder he had no part in. It is an injustice to keep him from returning home. Next is Brian Mason, who is a loving husband and hopes to reunite with his wife and mother in Texas. He dreams of starting his own business and one day raising a family. At the age of 18, Brian had never been in trouble, but it was a fist fight that had led to a murder conviction and a death sentence. Brian is innocent. He has never killed anyone, never had any intent to murder, nor did he even have a gun. The case of Brian is an example of the criminal justice system's lack of fairness and California's cruel and unjust laws, which predominantly affect Black and brown youth. 20 years later, the community still speaks on the innocence of Brian and the injustice of his imprisonment. He should not die in prison, as he has already spent 20 years away from his loved ones for a crime he did not commit. Brian needs to come home.
Isidro Vasquez is known as having a great sense of humor, even after spending over a decade behind bars. He is a good person with an amazing heart. Isidro loves his family more than anything and wants nothing more than to be with them and help them. Until the pandemic shut down prison visits, his elderly mom and family were still making the long drive to see him. His children and grandchildren would love to see him come home. Isidro is currently in college and has been taking courses for about a year. He has hopes, yet keeps it to himself, perhaps out of fear that they will never happen. Mr. Isidro Vasquez was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 50 years to life in prison, not because he committed a crime, but because he was racially profiled in a community with a long history of over-policing and racially motivated stops. Isidro became a suspect to a murder when a witness claimed she saw a Mexican man with long curly hair and two Black men park their car and get out of it in the vicinity of a murder. San Diego police falsely identified Isidro as one of the murder suspects, even though he did not match the description of the witness, because he is a Mexican man with Black friends in the community. Our judicial system locks away young men of color based on nothing more than the possibility of involvement in a crime. That is unacceptable. Isidro has served 16 years for something he did not do. Let him go home. Terrance Nowden is a husband. He is a father and a grandfather. He is a brother and a friend. His parents are aging. He is currently sentenced to life without the possibility of parole in California. Terrance has been incarcerated for 20 years, longer than people who have committed murder. And he did not kill anyone. His sentence constitutes cruel and unusual punishment based on California's old felony murder law. Help us bring Terrance home.
Now we want to recognize our panelists and moderators for this evening. First off, there's Layla Aziz, Director for Pillars of the Community, criminal justice organizer, and law student. Layla is an abolitionist who believes that we can live in a world without cages. She has worked on numerous policy initiatives such as SB1437, Time Done, and voter disenfranchisement. And Dr. Timmy Tote, who is an active member of Asian Solidarity Collective. He's a clinical psychologist and an educator. He completed his pre-doc internship at Juvenile Forensic Services, and his area of expertise is in community mental health.
Jamie Wilson is an organizer at Pillars of the Community, a member of MOGO's Police Accountability Board, a member of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, and has worked with numerous organizations in San Diego and throughout California on a number of issues. Her primary focus is ending the discrimination of documented gang members in the court system by ending gang documentation, gang enhancements, gang injunctions, and the existence of law enforcement units designated to incarcerating gang members. Eddie Zhang is the president and founder of New Breath Foundation and works to mobilize resources to support Asian American and Pacific Islanders harmed by violence and the unjust immigration and criminal justice systems. A 2019-21 Rosenberg Foundation Leading Edge Fellow, and a 2015-17 Open Society Foundation Soros Justice Fellow. He served as co-director of the Asian Prisoner Support Committee and co-founded the first ever ethnics program in San Quentin State Prison, Roots. Fluent in 3 languages and skilled in motivational speaking, cross-cultural healing, workshop facilitation, and conflict mediation, Eddie is the co-editor of Other, an Asian and Pacific Islander prisoners anthology, and serves on the board of Chinese for Affirmative Action. Eddie's commitment to service has been frequently recognized, most recently with the 2017 Bridging the Gap Award from the University of Pennsylvania, 2019 Frederick Douglass 200 Award, and 2019 Ellison S. Onizuka Memorial Award from the National Education Association. Eddie is the subject of the award-winning documentary, Breathin', The Eddie Zhang Story. With much gratitude, he is eager to collaborate with new partners in empowering marginalized communities and abolishing the prison industrial complex. And now we welcome ASC core member, Dr. Grace Jun, to introduce our opening speaker.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Grace Shinhit Jun, and I'm a founding core member and organizer with Asian Solidarity Collective. On behalf of our members, I am honored to introduce Eddie Zhang. Eddie is a friend of Asian Solidarity Collective and a thoughtful, kind individual dedicated to solidarity and healing. We are inspired by his commitment to bring education to those who are incarcerated. His profound and important work brings us all closer to a liberated world. We are honored to have him begin our panel discussion with an opening speech. Please give a warm and generous welcome to Eddie Zhang.
Thank you, Dr. Jun. Happy New Breath, everyone. Before I continue, I want to invite all of you to just take in a couple of deep breaths and just kind of feel the breath that is sustaining our lives. You know, sometimes we take our breath for granted because we expect that breath to come. And that is the survival breath that we all needed. However, in order for us to thrive, we must appreciate the breath that is connecting us to each other. I want to share a little bit about how my journey has connected to where we are today, you know, in this discussion. As a founder and the president of the New Breath Foundation, we try to offer hope, healing, and new beginnings for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders who don't have the access to the resources that they need, especially new immigrants and refugees, people impacted by incarceration and deportation, and survivors of violence. And on face value, people may judge me to think that, wow, you know, that person really fits into this model minority myth, that he's very successful, you know, he's doing the work and he's expected to do. But people would know that I've been incarcerated for 21 years of my life, starting at the age of 16. And that is something that really solidified my commitment to abolishing the prison industry complex. And when we look at mass incarceration, I want us to really look at the connection between slavery that was supposedly abolished, but yet because of 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution, the party states that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. This puts in a clause into continue the modern day slave plantation in the form of the prison industry complex. I think that has to resonate with all of us whenever we're talking about mass incarceration and abolition. Given that SB 1437 definitely allows the opportunity to right just a little bit of the wrongs that the mass incarceration has impacted the people of color communities, especially the Black and Brown community. So, you know, as a juvenile life-term prisoner, people called it juvenile lifers. When I first entered the system and was charged as an adult, I met so many other juvenile lifers that who did not commit the murder that they were convicted of, but they were in a commission of crime when a murder happened. And therefore, there's so many thousands of people that who fit in that category. And it's inhumane for the district attorney or the courts to defy the law that is being passed by the voters and continue to incarcerate people and continue to enslave our community members. That has to stop. And when we're looking at how we connected to the people that who experience many of this trauma, right, as a result of leading them to making poor choices and mistakes, we have to make sure that we understand that as we are saying that we have to hold those people accountable, we also have to understand that those people are also human beings and that they have the ability to change when given the culturally competent resources and support that they need to rehabilitate themselves. And so when we look at mass incarceration, I also don't want to minimize the fact that the Asian American and Pacific Islander community are experiencing this idea of tyranny in small numbers. because in comparison to the Black and brown community or the rest of the community who are incarcerated, the Asian American and Pacific Islander community has a smaller number. However, within our own community, our number has steadily increased in the last 25 years. But we don't get the attention and the support and the culturally competent services that we need to heal ourselves, so we don't recidivate, so we can become a contribute member of society. So that's one piece of the things that people neglect. And when we talk about the school to prison pipeline and how the lack of investment in our young people, in our education, and the heavily overproportionate investment in the prisons, we also have to remember beyond the school to prison pipeline, there's this school to prison and deportation pipeline, because for many of the non-citizens, after they serve their time, they are automatically detained and put under deportation proceedings. So we have to also understand how the criminal justice system also create a huge impact in many of the immigrant, refugees, and non-citizen communities. Lastly, I want to say that, when we look at the current state of COVID that we are living in and how it impacts mass incarceration in relationship to SB 1437, is that, many of the people could be out here right now. They could be free because legislation allowed them to be free. But yet people continue to defy those laws because they can, and because they think that the community won't hold them accountable. So they allow people to die inside of prison. So they will have blood on their hands. So I want to finish this piece before we go on our panel, is that when you deny people's humanity by saying that some people are more deserving than others, then it tears into the fabric of what humanity is. So we have to understand that there's no differences between the people who are incarcerated or people like us who are currently free, because we are all human beings on this earth of humankind. So with that, I look forward to our engaging conversation with our amazing panelists. I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Eddie, for your powerful words. It's really a privilege to be in this space with you right now, just like it's a privilege to hand it off to Kim and Candy to begin our panel. Just introducing our moderators for today. Kim Moore, who is a community organizer and co-founder of D.D. McClure Memorial Bail Fund, and will be moderating our discussion tonight along with Dr. DJ Cutton Candy. Who is a co-founder, core member, and main organizer of Asian Solidarity Collective. She describes herself as a people's hip hop DJ scholar and was born and raised in Queens, New York. She is a disabled Filipinx American queer writer, poet, theater performer, educator, hip hop feminist, and community organizer. AKA she does a lot.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for such an important and informative opening, as well as such a powerful statement and sharing of story, Eddie. Thank you very, very much for such a powerful information and framing for us to start our conversation with today. If we could have all our panelists turn on their cams and join us into this conversation as Kim and I will embark in this conversation with all of you. So excited to have you all here. I'm going to start with the first question, and then from here we can, not everyone has to answer everything. We'll just have a very natural vibing conversation back and forth. Really organic. The first question I really want to ask, and any of you can answer this, if you can explain what the terms for felony murder and what gang enhancements are. I think for those folks in community who really understand this work, in terms of criminal justice may to know, but there's a larger audience we are speaking to here. So if we could kind of break that down, and why are they relevant to these 4 stories that we're lifting up today and other stories out there, and how and what this is related to that and to the fight to end mass incarceration. And from here on out, Kim and I will then moderate back and forth, and I'll be mostly following her lead in this.
No one's going to take that one? Okay, I'll take it.
Want to do
I miss anything. So felony murder it comes from British common law. As most of you know, America's legal system is based on the British legal system. The United States was a colony of Britain for a long time until the American Revolution. The felony murder rule basically says that if you are involved in an underlying felony, then if a murder happens, whether that's committed by you, someone else, whether you knew about it or didn't know about it, whether you knew the person was armed, if you had anything to do with that, you could also be prosecuted for that murder. It's interesting because in the American legal system, first-degree murder and second-degree murder require different elements. And some of those elements of first-degree murder are malice, a malice in your heart, a desire to kill. Second-degree murder has less of a standard of malice included. Felony murder does not need malice. It does not need a malignant heart. It does not need any of those things. All it needs is an underlying felony. So what you have had in America's criminal justice system, the United States criminal justice system, because America encompasses a lot of countries other than the US. But in the United States criminal justice system, what you had were people who were doing far more time convicted of first-degree murder than a person who actually perpetrated or killed someone. And this caused some dynamic, unequal disparities within the criminal injustice system. So as things went on, there were certain states that outlawed felony murder. Before that, Great Britain outlawed felony murder because of the impact, and it wasn't fair. And other places like Hawaii and Michigan followed suit, and they don't have a felony murder rule. You are tried, you are charged with what can be proven that you did. Felony murder, none of that has to be proven. You can get murder for just anything. And there's certain felonies for felony murder they use. And those are economic crimes that happen to Black, brown, and API people in the community who are in poverty. So a robbery or a burglary can get you a first-degree murder charge, and you didn't have a gun, you never shot anyone. A person could have tripped and shot someone. We've seen people get first-degree felony murder when the store owner kills the person that they went into the store with to rob the store. They get a harsher sentence than actual perpetrators who didn't like someone and walked up and shot them. So there's some serious disparities. And also along with that, people were getting something called the special circumstance in felony murder, which was death sentence eligible. And you're gonna hear more about that with Brian and Terrance. So that's felony murder. Gang enhancements fit in there because both with natural and probable consequences and felony murder, the DA, whether they're looking to get them the gang enhancement or not, they utilize that in order to pretty much convince the jury that this person is eligible for anything, would do anything, and this is an evil person. So they've somehow trained the community, number one, that the only gang members are people of color. And number two, people of color are evil. And we have to really understand that and really acknowledge that as we go forward. Also, in our California's law system, a gang enhancement or a personal discharge of a firearm can only be given to a person who shoots a gun. That's with anyone except a person they say is a documented gang member. And you're going to see some deep flaws. I know Jamie's going to really touch on that, from documentation to gang enhancement, charging, and things of that nature, how the system within itself has institutionalized racism to the point that these are now Black codes. We are now existing in a very similar situation as in Jim Crow and the Black codes. So you have young people who are serving 25 to life, and they never had a gun, but they got personal discharge of a firearm because the DA said they lived in a bad community and they're all gang members, and that road. And those are the issues we're having. So gang enhancements, felony murder, natural and probable consequences. You're going to see a lot of gang-driven things in that, which gave people first-degree and second-degree murder. You had kids at a party. A fight breaks out. Someone shoots a gun. These kids didn't know. We had kids who were going on their way to college, and someone shoots a gun, and because that kid was linked to that person and we're all gang members, we're evil, and just lock us away and no one should care, this kid then gets a first-degree sentence under natural and probable consequences without having a gun, without knowing a gun was ever going to be used, from a spontaneous fight that no one planned. And those are that many kids from frat parties to sports events happen all the time. So these are the disparities we're seeing. And for some reason, when that pill is taken for many people in America on why they justify this, the reasoning is they're gang members, and that reasoning is based on racism within itself. Thank you, guys. Anybody else, please jump in. I know I missed some stuff.
That was really good, Layla. I think that's so important, the way you broke it down, because I think it's so intentional, that language in explaining this with how the criminal justice system works is so far off for folks who don't understand this, right? And it keeps people ignorant and naive to understanding the whole system and how it functions. And you really kind of broke it down in ways that people who may not be familiar would understand, so they can best know how they can advocate and push for things. So I really appreciate how you broke that down in a way that other folks can come together. I know you were pointing to Jamie. I think Jamie's ready to go. What I really want to point out here, specifically the panelists who are joined us today, Layla, Jamie, and Dr. Timmy Toe, is folks who are part of the Freedom Justice campaign, and we're on a weekly call every week discussing through these cases. So anybody else can pop on, but I think Jamie was ready to go, and then I'm going to hand it back to Kim to continue on with questions. So Jamie, go ahead.
Layla did a great job covering all of that. I just wanted to add to it that just walking into situations like this, a lot of times you'll see people who are right now fighting to utilize this new law that were even scared to move into a trial, because going into a trial means days and days of gang expert testimony, where the police will come in and for days they're the only one on the stand, and they're drilling the jury with pictures of people throwing up their set and a history of that particular set's crimes. These experts aren't people who live within our communities. They're not people who have ever they don't take part in just everyday activities within the set that they claim to be experts of. These are just people who read crime reports. That's it. You can hardly consider that person an expert when their goal is only to make a long list of crimes, field interviews, and then to get someone to go to prison for as long as possible. So with gang members, you'll see a lot of times they're innocent. They truly are. They're innocent, but they know they're not going to get a fair shot at trial. They know what's going to happen at trial. They know what the jury is going to see at trial. And you just get backed up into a corner of just taking a plea deal for something you didn't do, or taking a plea deal for something that is to the extent that you weren't even close to being involved in something. So I just wanted to add to what Layla said, but she did a great job. Thank you.
I want to add on to how easy it is to get documented as a gang member. So if I get pulled over with a known gang member 2 times and they have documented that I am pulled over, or I have police contact with a gang member twice, I'm already documented as a gang member. What else they're doing with social media is police are going through, combing through. So if you take pictures with known gang members and they see you in pictures with known gang members, then you are a documented gang member at that point. So it's really wide broad, and it doesn't mean that people are even gang members. They could just, their family members are gang members, but since they have taken pictures with it, or they're in a car with their family and it's a known gang member, you will be documented as a gang member.
I just want to share something. When I was at Atlanta one time for a national gang conference, so all the law enforcement, the gang experts, and some of the community folks are there at a training. The 2 top gang experts of the country are putting images of the things that they collected in the community. Well, one of the images, one of the organizations is actually a violence prevention, a youth serving organization in San Francisco. And because they were in a picture with people that were former gang members, they coined them as the gang. And so this is how easily it can, for people who have gang enhancements, if they ever committed a crime, they can get a heavier sentence on top of what they have done.
Thank you all for that. I think that really quick, I just want to go back really quick to what Layla was saying when she was describing, you know, how our current system here in the United States, the criminal injustice system, because there is no justice in it, really was born out of the British system. And I think that we all need to remember that and start there, because that goes back into colonialism, right? And European settlers coming over here, you know, committing genocide against indigenous peoples, enslaving Black people, and then bringing their laws to this land and having us govern ourselves according to their rule. And so that's even how cash bail came to be, right? And that's a huge issue in California, not just California, but nationwide. So Layla, I really appreciate you bringing that historical context in, because I would challenge folks to think about, like, we all need to question when we hear these laws and things like that, where did they come from? Because they never just spring up out of thin air, right? They've been brought to us, they've been given to us by people who are oppressors, right? So I appreciate that historical context. And Jamie, Eddie, and Dr. Timmy, I also appreciate you all, you know, talking about gang documentation and how the parameters for someone being documented are so loose. If we're being very honest, most of us who are on this panel or moderating would essentially be documented as gang members, right? Because of the communities we step into to organize, the individuals we interact with. And I also want to be very clear too, being documented as a gang member should not be a badge of shame. So that's something that has, that's some shame that's been put on gang members. And I think that we need to do away with that and do away with that stigma, because we also need to look at the history of gangs too, right? And how they came to be. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you all is if you could explain more for those watching and those who will watch, what SB1437 is and why it's become a tactic in organizing towards abolition. And then it's a 2-part question too, because I also want to ask for the audience to know, is it retroactive? And the reason I'm asking that is because I won't name any names, but I remember a case that happened in LA back in 2003 that involved several individuals. They were very young Black men. And, you know, one was a driver, another was in the passenger's seat, and the passenger had actually shot a gun, right? At individuals. And that person was a youth at the time. He's since been released. He's been out and free for many years now. The driver of the vehicle who did not do the shooting is still in in prison to this day, and was sentenced to 99 years. And to me, and I know to people like Layla and other folks, we always say like life without parole and being sentenced that long, that is a death sentence. That is the death penalty. You're being sentenced to die in a cage. So I just wanted to share that to just show like how serious it is when the panelists are saying that felony murder is about implicating people who were not actually doing the act. The fact that driver is still sitting in prison really upsets me. And I'm very glad that the person who did the shooting is released, because I believe in second chances, right? And that's what our work is about. It's about abolishing the conditions that lead people into these systems in the first place, and that the fact that these systems can persist too. So again, the question is, can you explain what SB 1437 is and why it's become a tactic in organizing towards abolition? And also, is SB 1437 retroactive for those folks who are still languishing in prisons who should be free?
I'm going to pass it if you guys make me go one more time first. I'm not going first next time. So SB 1437 is basically a bill that abolishes felony murder, aiding and abetting, or accomplice felony murder for specific groups of people who were not the killer, who did not have intent to kill. And there's a caveat that comes from a Supreme Court case called Tyson versus Arizona, and the People versus Eamon. There's two cases, and that did not have reckless indifference to human life and major participation. We can go down a legal rabbit hole on this one. The natural and probable consequences theory is for people who they say participated in a felony, and the felony they participated in was the death was a natural and probable consequence of that felony. And so felony murder, there's also underlying felonies. If you want to get into the weeds of which felonies they are, they're listed in Penal Code 190.2A. The ones we see mostly are economic crimes, which are burglary and robbery. Let me go a little deeper in robbery. Robbery only means taking something with force or fear. And so what we'll see are robbery charges when a person is really committing petty theft, but the person says that they snatched their arm. Petty theft becomes robbery. So when we start really looking at our judicial system and how the district attorneys know how to manipulate these different penal codes, that in itself becomes problematic. But felony murder are specific felonies in 190.2A, robbery and burglary being the two we see the most. And the other felonies are listed in the natural, and they're not listed, but they'll say they're the natural and probable consequences. SB 1437 is retroactive, meaning that if you believe that not only were you convicted, but you could have been convicted and you took a plea deal. So people who took plea deals are also part of SB 1437. Then you can submit a petition. The petition is very simple. I've seen lawyers make motions, but the petition itself was made for any prisoner to just check off boxes. And the most important box would be, I want an attorney, and submit that petition to the courts, serving the district attorney and making sure the public defender gets a copy. And I hope I answered enough questions on what SB 1437 is. It really was a law that punished people severely. And let's just talk about one quick case. The case is called Banks. It's a famous case because so many people were under the same thing. Banks goes and does a robbery of a dispensary with his friends. Not a great idea. And there's a penal code for robbery that you have to suffer. But he goes and he's a getaway driver. He's literally not even in the building. The security guard starts shooting at his friends. His friends start shooting back. The security guard is killed. Banks got a death sentence for sitting in a car. He got a death sentence that said he will never be eligible for parole for sitting in a car. So the Supreme Court came in 2014 and said, This is after people did 15, 20 years on these cases. That's a little harsh. That's an Eighth Amendment kind of harsh. That's cruel and unusual punishment. So we're going to take away your death sentence, but you still have 25 to life because it's first-degree murder, then special circumstances. So these things basically made people who didn't murder anyone, didn't have a gun, didn't know there was going to be a shooting, nothing, have death sentences. So that's when Nancy Skinner, if you have any money you want to give it to a legislature, give it to Senator Skinner. The woman is badass, okay? She came and she said, you know what? I'm going to pass this and I'm going to get a Republican to walk with me down this aisle because this bill is atrocious. And they changed the felony murder rule and they made sure it's retroactive. And they even made it where specific people with death sentences can now fit in and have their whole entire sentence overturned. A lot of work is going on in the Supreme Court though. DAs hate this bill. They hate it with a passion. They're fighting it tooth and nail. And so every step forward, the DAs fight and send us to the Supreme Court after the appeals court. So a lot of us are stuck in this traffic jam right now. But people who've been down because it's retroactive for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, finally have the ability to come home.
Did anyone else want to chime in on that? That was very beautiful, beautifully laid out, Layla. Okay, if not, we'll move on to our next question. Candy.
I wasn't sure. So the next question is like around the challenges, of course. What challenges have people currently or historically faced from the DAs? Specifically, of course, we know we're talking about San Diego's infamous Summer Stevens DA, district attorney, and judges and other gatekeepers in all of this and this path on getting their SB 1437 cases reviewed. I think this is something we've been talking about in terms of their stall tactics being done, and if there's things that we can let the people know what kind of challenges and obstacles we're facing. And then maybe Eddie, you can also share just in general, like on a larger perspective, even though you're not here in San Diego, what folks are facing that you all may know around SB 1437.
I'll take this. So keep in mind, SB 1437 was passed in January of 2019. The first person that got released under this bill was in February of 2019. But instead of reviewing these cases, what our DDA did was saying that this is unconstitutional based on Proposition 7 and Proposition 115. Proposition 7 was mandatory minimum sentences for crimes that you commit. Proposition 115 was adding on certain crimes that fall under the felony murder rule. So because of challenging this and taking it up to appellate court, it took a year just to get these reviewed, right? Once the appellate court looked at it, they was like, you know, this does not make sense because SB 1437 is more specifically on the action of the crime, right? Did this person committed the crime or not? What the DA is doing is some bullshit unconstitutional because these are minimum sentence for people who actually committed the crime. So they know it's not effective, but they're just trying to stall. So because of the stall tactics, it went to the appellant denied it. She tried to take it up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court didn't even look at it. They're like, we're just gonna follow the appellant because it doesn't make sense. Anyone with any common knowledge or reading ability would know that it does not make any sense of what they're claiming to be unconstitutional. So that took us all the way into February of like 2020. Once that the Supreme Court denied it, they were supposed to start reviewing cases, but then COVID hit. So they're using that excuse that COVID, we can't review any cases. So they're pushing it back. Right now, because of COVID, we can still do video hearings. But instead of doing that, they're not staffing up enough people. They're not reviewing these cases They're denying people for no reason, not giving them a reason of why they're denying. So, you know, we're all the way in December now. A lot of these people should have been out by March of 2019. This is a whole year and a half to 2 years that they're keeping people locked up that shouldn't be locked up right now.
Right. Thank you for sharing that, Timmy. A good amount of stall tactics happening on every level. I think also the transparency, some of the things we talk about week to week is the lack of communication that happens too. That can be a real tactic too, and it keeps people not necessarily just anticipating because they don't even know what they're anticipating for, but like just the anxiety of the waiting of never knowing when or never knowing what. Like what are why are those kind of things happening, you think? What other obstacles are we seeing is either associated as a stall tactic or an additional layer of more obstacles around SB 1437? Because we do have folks in here in the chat that literally asked, you know, why aren't people, even the question here, why aren't people rallying to recall the DA, things of that sort. So like, what are some of these obstacles we're seeing? And then again, bringing back to Eddie too, some things that you might be seeing on your end.
Yeah, I just want to say that a lot has to do with the lack of the resources and the communications, right? And even though there are many, you know, like laws like, you know, SB 1437 and many other laws that was passed in California that deals with resentencing. I think one, the people who are currently incarcerated, some of them know, right? Because many of them have a lot of different incarcerated lawyers inside, and then they're in communication with people, the other lawyers out there. But then there's still a lot of people don't know they fit into that category, so they don't know how to advocate for themselves within, and then their loved ones are in the community. If they're not really involved in some of this advocacy or legislations, then they wouldn't necessarily know that their loved ones actually qualify for this, where they can really do some collective advocacy with the district attorney's office and with the courts, right, in that space, and or calling the legislators to be able to put pressure on legally on that front. So that's one piece of it. And it all depends on like the district attorneys also. I would say the San Francisco district attorney, which is Bodine, you know, he has been very fairly actively engaging in some of the files, the cases that came out of San Francisco, right? And then, you know, in Alameda County, you know, Nancy O'Malley have done some work, but not necessarily, you know, Nancy O'Malley, who's the district attorney in Alameda County, that who don't necessarily like, you know, also take like a very progressive stance to review all the cases for resentencing. So that's one aspect of it. The other bill is SB 1393, which addressed the nickel prior, right? Which is you can do resentencing and then eliminate a nickel prior for people that who committed a crime before. They add 5 more years on top of their sentencing just because 20 years ago they did something. And then the penal code with 1170 D1 that actually allow people CDCR and the district attorney's office to take an active role in doing the resentencing because they have to recommend it, right? So that's why it takes the community has to organize, right? An organization has to organize to be able to challenge this and hold those the district attorneys and the legislation accountable.
Yeah, I wanted, you know, that you mentioned also an important point about the community has to organize, and I want to kind of revisit that back a little bit later on because it's a very reason why Pillars and ASC came together and joined. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that, how it came together, but I want to capture anyone else that might want to comment on this, either Jamie or Layla.
I just wanted to add a quick highlight that San Diego, out of all of California, had the district attorney. We have Summer Stephan, and she was the one in the whole state of California who appealed this, who went against this, who fought this, and continued to try to fight it after she won an appeal. So we're down here with these 4 cases, and I want to bring it back to them, that are just being shut. We have one who was shut down without giving a reason, no reason. Another person, Mr. Vasquez, was approved for a review, and that was, we're going on a year, and he hasn't received another piece of paper in the mail since. We talked about the lack of communication. Another obstacle that we're facing is that the DA has a team. They have a squad put together already to deal with these SB 1437 cases. They're ready to go. They've got their special operations unit, head prosecutor, they're ready to go. We have 1 or 2 public defenders who are on case overload, and they're not prepared. They're not equipped with the staff to do that. We need the money distributed equally. It's a reflection of what's happening in the courtrooms every day too, and that the district attorney has all of this money to do their stuff with. Public defender has less. It's the same thing. So I just wanted to add those obstacles, and again leave with the highlight that Summer Stephan, San Diego's DA, is the one who appealed this in the entire state of California and lost, but it was her.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for naming that. We all know how we are not a fan of her. I'm going to hand this up to Kim for the next question.
Yeah, I appreciate you naming that as well, because I was clapping. You tried and you failed. But Jamie brings a really good point up, and I think it's something that we can maybe get to later if we have more time. But Jamie's showing us the contradictions, right? The comparisons, the contrasts here. The DA has all of this power. It's this infinite power, right? And then the public defenders have a smaller amount of it. They hold just a little bit. And that's where we come in as organizers, right? Because we may not have the organized money that they have, but we have organized people. And that equates to power too. So that's why, like, we need to do our part to make sure that we're pushing this forward and ensure that Summer Stephan continues to lose. Sorry, that was, I don't like her. So anyway, thank you, Jamie, for naming that for everyone. I really appreciate it. I want to hear, and before I ask this question too, I just want to remind folks that right now, folks are languishing in prisons with death sentences, right? With life without parole and just getting like 90 years, 80 years, like that's a death sentence. But with the introduction of COVID, prisons and jails are now death camps. I want to make that so clear. So we're approaching a holiday season. A lot of folks in prisons and jails are finding it harder to communicate with their families and loved ones. So if you have an opportunity, please consider being a pen pal to folks who are locked up. And if you want more information about that, hit me up at Soul Revision on either Twitter or Instagram, so I can connect you to organizations who are doing pen pal programs right now, because we need to communicate with folks. And that leads me to the next question, which is, for you all who know these individuals, I would love to hear, what are your favorite memories of Donald, Brian, Terrance, and Isidro? And then also, if they were freed, if they were freed from those bars, freed from a death camp, to be here with us right now in this moment, what do you think they would say?
Was someone were you about to go, Layla? Okay. I had contacted, I let Isidro's sister answer this, and so I'm going to read what she sent. And I'm emotional, so I'm probably going to start crying partway through, just a heads up. When I asked her, what is your favorite memory of your brother? She said, my favorite memory of my brother is when my dad passed away and he wanted to help with the funeral expenses, and he didn't have the funds to be able to do that. I told him not to worry, that just being there with my mom and us was sufficient. That was enough. Then on my dad's death anniversary, he was asked by the parisher to assist with the collection of offerings during Mass. He was happy to assist with it. My brother is like my son. I love him and have many memories of him with us and his family at birthday parties, gatherings, and holidays. I remember attending his 6th grade graduation. I was proud of the young man he was becoming. He loved playing softball and was even on a team. I could go on, but I know it would take me a while. When I asked her if he was free right now, I'm sorry, what do you think he would say? She said that I'm sure he would say, if I was free, I would start a new life with my family. I would look for work to support my family. I would enjoy my grandkids. I would spend time with my mother, who's getting old and has various illnesses. And I want to show my sister, who has been with me through good and bad, that I can be a man who takes care of not only myself, but my family. She said, I think my brother would really thank God if he was given the opportunity to be free.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jamie. I know that's hard as a friend of the family, and just to read, what a family member thinks that their family would say. And I just want to pause for a moment, if we can just sit for a moment and uplift Isidro. May we uplift Terrance, may we uplift Brian, may we uplift Donald and every person who's incarcerated right now and their families. Not just because of the season that we're currently in, heading towards the holidays, but because being in a cage is not fit for any human being. Not a single human being should be in a cage. This is just not right. So if we could just sit for a moment with that and just think of the families of those incarcerated and those currently incarcerated. Thank you again, Jamie, for reading that. Did any other panelists want to share their thoughts or words?
Jimmy, you want to go first? It's going to be emotional.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, I
good?
could go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just miss hanging out with Donald. He used to come over and we just hang out in the front of my house with me and all the other homies, and just sitting there and just like shooting the shit, joking around, and just bonding and having a fun time. And I really miss that. It's been 15 years since I last seen him, maybe even longer, because he's locked up. And I miss him. I miss seeing him in person. I think if he's out here, like, what I want to do is just share a meal with him and just, hear his laugh. He'd be saying some funny things all the time, and he can put a smile on people's face. And that's what I miss.
Thank you, Dr. Timmy. And I'm going to ask us again to just sit with that for a moment because it's heavy. And we're sending love to you too, Dr. Timmy. Okay. Anyone else want to share?
I want to start with Brian. When I was young, I became a victim of violence when the man I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, who knows if that would have been true, but he was murdered and in Bay Vista. And I came back later and I went to his community, and the moms were always saying what they did to Brian and what they did to Tondway was wrong. And I didn't understand the criminal justice system. I was in my mid-20s when I came back, and I started kind of following what happened and saw what happened to Brian and the mothers and the people in that community, when they talk about Brian Mason, they talk about this kid who had never been in trouble a day in his life, who had graduated from high school, who had a job, but was of their community. Just a great personality. His brother was like this big guy in Southeast San Diego. So he's the little brother to him. So kind of overshadowed, but still who he was and holding on firmly to who he was. And when they talk about his family and we talk about segregation and us as Black folks coming out of slavery and Jim Crow and our parents coming from down south, and finally after redlining and Jim Crow getting that piece of land, buying that piece of land, and then them telling this woman, this mom, your son is going to die in prison because of something he didn't do. And the mom not believing that and putting her house up for an attorney and losing that wealth, how wealth is built in America to save her son who's still given a death sentence. Those aren't great stories, but those are they're testaments of this young man who this community held up and was one of the brightest, the best and brightest out of this community, who did everything right, but attend a party and lost his life, and how only certain people would ever have to go through what Brian went through, and still giving acknowledgement and love and support to the victim of that night. Because we're all, the gray area of victims is gray. We're all victimized, perpetrators, whatever. That's why transformative justice stops the violence that we're all victims of. And wanting to bring Brian home, and hopefully he can buy his mom her house back. She's in Texas now to be cheaper, because that American dream, America's nightmare, its criminal justice nightmare, stole that from her. And just seeing this, the repetition of just Black folks in this Monopoly game, they just take our pieces and throw them every time we go around. Brian needs to come home. He's married. Hopefully his wife is on here. And he would be an asset to our community. We need to fight for Brian. Terrance, his sister talks a lot about him. And right now their family's going through a lot, because Terrance was the protector. He comes from a large family. He's the middle child, 2 older brothers, 4 younger siblings, 2 older brothers. And you know, the middle child sometimes gets forgotten about, but he was the family protector. He made sure that no one harmed his family. He made sure that his mother, while they were living in the depths of poverty, they had food to eat every night. He was who that was. And just looking in his bloodline and his family and how they come from escaped slaves. And these are Seminoles who were then marched through the Trail of Tears. These are Black people who escaped slavery, went into Florida, fought against white folks. These are criminals, because they call escaped slaves criminals. So his family was criminalized from the beginning, and then the Trail of Tears to those Indian reservations. And his sister talk about growing up in Oklahoma at certain times in their lives and on the reservations, and how he always protected her from San Diego to Oklahoma. He was always there for her. And the tears, she's willing to give everything she has to bring her brother home, as is his family, his father, growing old. And in his meme that Asian Solidarity created, it says his family, they're getting old. His mom just died 2 days ago. And so now mom is gone, and this man's petition, the appeals court ruled in his favor. He's stuck in the Supreme Court because these DAs are fighting everything tooth and nail. Even when they win, they make their win prolonged as their parents die. As Terrance has COVID. As COVID ravages through the system. And we're reading about the young Black male in High Desert State Prison where he was, who died and had no underlying medical conditions. And knowing that they're not given any kind of treatment that would help a person survive through something like that. There's no sanitizers, no hand sanitizers. They're not sanitizing the showers for any of the people that we're talking about today. But these are great people, each of them, with the stories that they have. And Terrance needs to come home for his children. We need to stop the cycle of absent parenting, of absent fatherhood. And he needs to be there for his dad as his dad gets old. He's the life of the party. He thinks he's funny. He's the comedian of them all, and thinks all his jokes, he's Eddie Murphy or something. But they need to bring him home. He was his family's protector and provider.
Oh, Thank you, Layla, for sharing that. And if you all notice, there's a common theme between all of these stories that we're hearing, right? Poverty, violence, right? And I just want to remind people that poverty in and of itself is violent. That alone is violent. Everyone wants to think about prisons being violent places where violent people have to go, but we create more violent human beings when we put them in cages because no one should be in them, right? Angela Davis has this incredible quote that I know so many people know, but she says, prisons do not disappear social problems. They disappear human beings. Why did she say that? Because when people go to prisons, the things that they went to prison for still exist outside, but that person is now gone. And I just really want us to think about that, especially for folks who might be watching who are not yet abolitionists, who are trying to learn and understand that we need to do more work and we need to continue educating folks and organizing them into abolition. Because let me tell you, prisons aren't, that ain't the answer. It's not the answer, y'all. I'm gonna turn it back over to Candy. Thank you all.
Thank you, Kim. I do want to ask Eddie if there's anyone you want to lift up as well before we continue with another question. No need if not wanting to at this time, but just wanted to check in.
Well, I mean, we're still fighting for the folks that who are in detention centers, in the ICE detention, right? That who were released from prison, and then they're inside, especially the person that we were lifting up, who was fighting, was a firefighter, right? And then we look at the system, how the system is really, they want to uplift humanity, but yet they dehumanize people at the same time. So you can't have it both, And so, yeah, I just want to uplift some of the folks that who are impacted by the mass incarceration and deportation, that who are currently suffering right now.
Thank you so much, Eddie. I think one of the reasons why really, you had a thought, a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. When Layla's talking about returning men and women home to their children, to their mothers, to their families, we're going to need the public to understand and not buy into the things that the district attorney is going to say and what they do say, and the demonizing of these men as if they're saving our communities by taking our men and women out of it. We're traumatized every single time they take one from us. These men they didn't just drop out of the sky from nowhere. These, as I always say, these are the fathers, husbands, brothers, sons of our communities. You're not saving our communities by coming in and charging and over sentencing and stripping our communities of men. I just wanted to touch on that.
Important to touch upon that, definitely. And I think what I was saying is that why we really wanted to ask this question is because here we are as organizations and organizers, but we're also folks specifically who are working alongside all of you who are, impacted by this experience of loved ones and people you care about in your lives, is why you are part of this work that we're doing in the Freedom and Justice Campaign, and in all the endeavors of the efforts of the work that you're doing in all your spaces that you're all in. And so we wanted to make sure that people understand that we're not an organizations that are just doing this work to do the work. We're here because we know that it's impacted your own lives, but also we working alongside folks. We're not making decisions without the folks who are most impacted. So I wanted to be very clear with that. And that's why we really wanted to lift up their stories and, humanize them, because that's what happens when a case is out there. They have it in print. It's riddled in criminal justice language that folks can understand and is confusing. And let's get to the heart of the story. These are not case numbers. These are people. And so that was really important. So I wanted to get to the next, another question here, looking at our time. We wanted to know that we know that mass incarceration invisibilizes people, so especially those that aren't at the center. So I know that some of you work with youth, specifically in the carceral system. What challenges are you facing when it comes to serving young folks who are incarcerated and their families?
I quit my job.
Go ahead, Layla. Go ahead.
I quit my job. That's what I have 19 years experience in. I was considered a youth offender, reentry, workforce development expert with train across the nation. And I thought that we were gonna use these best practices that were job training and certificates and mentoring, and these kids were gonna get on the right foot. And the DA would help because they would do diversion on little silly things like misdemeanors, and we were gonna make this happen. Until I got a call from one of my kids. Miss Layla, they have me in jail and they're trying to put me in jail for the rest of my life for Facebook post. And I told him, you were a fool, okay? You stop, you can't go to jail for the rest of your life for Facebook post. But little did I know that Prop 20 supported and passed by racist Pete Wilson and then given to voters as a crime bill that was 78 pages, had an obscure penal code called 182.5, which did allow them to do that. And when I got deeper in that case and I started really realizing, because about 6 or 7 of my youth went down in that case, I met Khalid. I joined the board of pillars and I never looked back. And I decided no longer will I be sitting at a table with the district attorney talking about reentry services, because your job is to make sure that people don't reenter. And when they reenter, that means you've sucked every piece of blood you could out of them. And you've used their bodies as commodities for the state and sold them, because this country's foundation is built on stolen land and slavery. And you're still stealing people and enslaving them. And so when we look at youth, the only way we're going to stop them is to do the same abolitionist mind frame. They started them young with DJJ. Those were gladiator schools. They had those kids. They would take, my generation went to juvenile hall at 10 years old for shooting BB guns, only in our community though. So this cycle of schools or prisons to schools to prisons, it was from home out of your mama's belly to go into prison. They would look at our young people and who had special education and IEPs, and then do trends for people who wanted to build cells and vendors and investors and different things like that. So my anything that I want to say to anybody working with young people is tell them the truth. Tell them the truth. Tell them what they're up against, and also tell them the lies, because you have people in our community who tell lies. They're not going to tell you when they tell you to hate somebody who lives over there, that when you get to prison, you're not going to have a say-so in that. Because they're going to tell you you're going to sell up with the person who was your enemy, and you're not bigger than the car, because you will lose your life. No one tells them those things. No one tells them that the people that they love aren't going to put a dime on their books. Not because they don't love them, they don't like them, but because we're from a poor community and they're barely trying to keep their head over water. No one tells them that their mama is probably going to be the one that's going to be there more than anyone else, from a friend to a girlfriend. Their mama is their best bet, the person that you really don't want to hear right now. So those are the things that I would say, and a lot of them they don't want to hear, because I hear you go, Layla. But every law is that these people have made is made against you. But don't not be a warrior. Choose, because when we make decisions, conscious decisions to go towards freedom, they're not always going to be what the white man says is legal, or what the United States says is legal. Choose what you're willing to go to prison for, and if it's for the freedom of your people, if it's to tear down the prison system brick by brick, I will gladly go. Because what they did to Brian Mason, if they ever try to do that to one of my sons, it's going to be major problems, and they're not going to be nonviolent. So the United States, San Diego needs to get their act together quickly, because what they're doing is unconscionable. What they have done to this young man and his family is not just a sad story. It's a cry. It's a war cry. And we need to give them a war cry back.
Thank you for that, Layla. Whew, I feel the same way with my children. I will not be, and you all know, not violent. And I think Timmy, you wanted to share. Go ahead.
But Jamie wanted to share too. Jamie, you can go first.
Are you sure? Okay. Um, I wanted to say that the challenges that I face and I feel like we face are not the youth, it's society, it's the adults trying to convince another grown person that these aren't little monsters running around. I am the very proud mother of a documented gang member. I have 7 children. I have 4 sons and 3 daughters. My second oldest son is serving a 10-year sentence for being a gang member who got in 2 fistfights with no victim. Nobody pressed any charges. Nobody ever filled out a report. 2 videos of fistfights. One was 27 seconds long. They don't even have the name of the person that they said he was in this fist fight with years ago, but the detective found this video online somewhere. We have an issue with adults not stepping in and protecting the youth. We need to stand in front of them. The second you hear your child is a gang member or you don't turn on them, it's part of growing up in some communities, and in our community it's part of growing up. And just because the more powerful people in this world don't experience that type of culture in their communities, it doesn't make it some horrible thing. It's just not something they understand. So my issues are with grown people not having an open mind or even attempting to protect the youth or understand that there are other realities than the ones that they live in their suburbs over in wherever. Our realities exist and they're okay.
Yes, yes, Jamie, snaps to that for real. I mean, because even hearing, learning of Donald's story and other stories here shared about, I look back to my young years and me getting into fights and how many times something could have happened to me. You know what I mean? And so it's the responsibility, just as we have to blame the system itself as the responsibility and holding them accountable. Timmy, I'm going to let you take this question.
So totally agree with Layla and Jamie about like prison to school to prison pipeline and the society issue. You know, the majority of youth who are people of color tend to get misdiagnosed. We know that about 90% of the youth who are in detained as youth have some kind of mental health. And, you know, instead of treating this as a mental health and getting them the services that they need, schools and their communities are just, you know, saying that these are just bad kids, right? But these kids are acting out for some reason. A lot of it is these kids are living in so low as communities where they're experiencing a ton of trauma. And if you're experiencing a ton of trauma, what's gonna happen is you're gonna act out. That's your way of survival. What you're learning, what you're seeing, you gotta act out. But when these kids are acting out in schools, they're getting labeled as conduct disorder or opposition defiant, as opposed to, you know, depression, anxiety, or whatever it is that is causing them to act out. And when you get labels like this of conduct disorder, people tend to neglect you, that these are just bad kids. So they're getting kicked out of schools. They're not getting the service they need. So they're ending up going into juvenile hall. And when in juvenile hall, you can see how, for me, I can see how defeated they get, that no one is giving them the support and feeling like the law is always out against them. No matter what they do, they can't get a break. It really tears down these kids. And working with them in the hall, while I can provide them with therapy, knowing that when they get released, they're getting released back to the same community. So they're re-traumatized, they're already getting traumatized being in the hall and getting these experience with police and whatnot. But when they get released, they're still gonna get re-traumatized because they're back in the environment of the chaos. And when you're in these environments, you're gonna continue acting out, or you're gonna use substance as a way to cope with this. And this is what most of the kids who are already detained gets back in, because they are using different ways as to cope. And with these coping ways of using substance or something, they're getting re-detained at a high rate. So I feel like we're not doing enough as a community to protect our kids so they're not experiencing these traumas and working on the traumas that they're experiencing.
Really quick, because you guys, it was really important, that question you asked. And I was sitting here and I was listening to Timmy talk, Dr. Timmy talk, and all 4 of these young men were kids when they were sentenced. They all 4 of them fall under youth offender parole if they didn't have the sentences that some of them, Brian and Terrance, didn't have the sentences that they had. So that even resonates what Dr. Timmy just said with me even more. So thank you, doctor.
Yeah,
I just wanted to add the piece around what Dr. Nadine Bird really emphasized on the adverse childhood experiences, right? We have to understand that as one of those key challenges that created those that pipeline, right? And then the conditioning that Timmy was talking about. We have to look at the conditioning, like who created those conditions for those adverse childhood experiences, and that's the key, right? Because if not, then we just keep trying to blame to justify things, or blame the young people, or blame even the adults that who continue to re-traumatize themselves in that cycle. So we need to stay focused.
right. That's why we need to divert these funds and give it back to the people where they belong and abolish the whole system. Thank you for that, everybody. I'm going to turn this back to Kim with our next questions, and hopefully we could get to some of the Q&As too.
Yeah, and I wanted to remind folks, if you have questions, drop them in the Q&A box so we can answer those, or have our panelists answer those. And then I just wanted to shout out real quick again, our live ASL interpreters and live captioning. And this is crucial. Disability justice is a part of our work to transform this world, y'all. So let's remember that. And as we move forward, I keep constantly trying to remind myself of that as well. So I love this question. Oftentimes people turn to things like calling the police when they think about community safety, right? So if they see someone they view as like acting erratic in the streets, or somebody who may be experiencing, a mental health crisis, or they have a disability and they don't really know how to engage that person, they often call the police. And unfortunately, we have seen the devastating effects of what happens when people call the police on individuals who are experiencing mental health crises and or are living with mental illness or disabilities. And oftentimes that leads to violence. And in the worst cases, it leads to police killing people. So my question to the panelists is what alternatives to involving law enforcement can community members engage in? And then what are other options that don't involve imprisonment and incarceration? Because we know that when police are involved, that's the path, right? It leads to incarceration. So again, that question is, what alternatives to involving law enforcement can community members engage in? And what are other options that do not involve imprisonment and incarceration?
I'm just going to regurgitate everything Kim has taught me, who just asked the question. This is her specialty. As an abolitionist, Kim has made it her life to join systems of alternatives to policing in different areas. And she does that in San Diego and building with different organizations to increase that capacity. First thing is we need to start off with the understanding that we have been stolen from. We have been defunded, we have been divested from, and we have been left. all of the resources that our tax dollars should be utilized for, to come in our community, for the infrastructure, to not just deal with harm at its leaves, at its branches, but the foundational reason for harm, and looking at harm bigger than the perpetrator and the victim, but the whole of stopping the cycle of that harm. And Eddie and Dr. Timmy really talked about that with the young people, and what they're going through has been stolen. And now people's only alternative purposely is the police. And that's not accidental. This country has invested in prisons, in jails, in criminal justice, in law enforcement, in district attorneys. Look at their moral documents, look at their budgets on local, county, and state and federal budgets to see what this country's moral documents are. They are not about embracing those with mental illnesses, embracing those with low IQs, embracing those, stopping trauma at the root, supporting families, building up families. CPS has a great budget because their job is to steal kids and to recycle money. That's the investment, instead of building up these families. And so when I look at different ways and I look at what we're going through, one of them is a group Kim has put together for mental health specialists who are coming together to build the infrastructure of calling the police during mental health crises, and even building these structures outside of the government. And that's why I'm really intrigued by what Kim is doing, because at any time they can steal this from us again, because it's one political conversation to the next. All we need is somebody to get mad, and we got 4 to 8 years of havoc. And that's how this country works. There's no deeply embedded premises of what this country says they're going to do for its people that's not going to be based on politics. And so follow Kim more. And I thank Kim for just the work that she's done. We do a lot of transformative stuff when it's dealing with the cases, and it's not easy work. There are harmed people, there are victims. Looking at those things, really building within that system. And we've had some successes there. And I think that we should start really looking at that within what we look at as crime, and what is crime and what's the reason. At Pillars, our window was broken, and a police officer wrote on one of our partners' walls or something that, can you let, in our address at Pillars, 6403 know? They knew it was Pillars because we're trying to defund them and they don't like us. Would you let them know that somebody broke into the office, broke the window, and I've arrested this person and boarded up your window? And I looked at it and I said, that's why people who own businesses love community policing, because that's what it works for. But really, I wanted the name. I was trying to get Tasha to help me get the name so we can bail them out, because that's a bail fund that we're a part of, like Kim, Tasha, Candy, and a lot of other folks on here on abolishing that system. So just the people are out there doing it. Just become a part of those things. And Eddie and I are on some really great work that we're doing with Revolve, right, Eddie? Revolve. What is wrong with me today? Just get in tune with the people doing the work, partner, coalition, build, and organize, and follow Kim and Candy.
Thank you, Layla. I appreciate that. And yes, you said something that was so critical. We have been stolen from, and right now there's this national debate around, is defund the police a proper slogan and all this? First of all, it's not a slogan, it's a demand. That's a political demand, okay? Power concedes nothing without a demand. So let's start there. And politicians will never lead the revolution, and they don't determine how we go about fighting for our liberation, okay? They have defunded us for years and never said a word. Obama would open his mouth to speak and talk down on defund the police, yet he watched as 50 schools in his community of Chicago closed down. That is defunding. We are now looking to run that money back into our hands, because we know what's needed to free our people. So thank you for sharing that. Did anyone else want to tap in and opine on that? If not, we can jump to the next questions, which Candy has.
Yes. Whew. All y'all doing important work. Everybody here. We could name drop everybody. I'm going to combine the next question or so around, since we shared a lot about folks here, again, you bringing in the humanizing piece of folks and what that, if you could describe that experience of mass incarceration with families and friends, and what role does community play in overcoming these challenges? We kind of spoke a little bit about the community has to do some organizing. And I think about this question as when Timmy first shared with me about Donald, I was like, okay, what are we going to do? It was really important for me because something that I know as someone, as an Asian American, as one who has come from gang communities from New York City and now here in San Diego, is knowing that there's lack of resources. And I think Eddie, you recently shared that Dr. Connie One, I love her, you should follow her with AAPI Women Lead, recently shared, and as they were advocating for their own organization, a quote that you recently said, Eddie, around less than 1% of Asian American orgs get funding, right? And so that's very, very important to note, because in talking about, and this is a question towards Timmy and Eddie to specifically answer, and then we can open it up to larger families, but I think it's important because Eddie spoke on top of, yes, definitely, we've got to lift up those most impacted, and Asian folks are, in comparison, aren't in the same amount of numbers, but there has been that increase, which Eddie shared earlier on in his opening speech, of Asian and the rise of Asian Americans and Asian folks in prison. And I think that's important because what are these resources that are lacking? Something I know specifically for me as a Filipinx person is that there's a thing called hiya and shame that we don't talk about these things. And I'm sure it's possibly the same in other communities of color and other BIPOC folks. Not talking about these things, and that might hinder some of those resources that can come to our communities. And then of course, Eddie opened up talking about the model minority myth. So what are some of these things and how is it impacting our families and directly with Asian communities, but I think also across how is this impacting our families, the communities, and how we can do the work we need to do to come together, and why we as Solidarity Collective and Pillars of the Community came together, and why Eddie was so important to this conversation as well. So anyone can start. Timmy, I know, and Eddie, I had a specific question for you in regards to that, to kind of lift up those pieces. But yeah, that's some of my thoughts for this.
To start with the model minority myth. So the model minority myth is where Asian Americans are successful, they do well, they don't get in any trouble. If we look at Asian as a monolithic group, that may be true, right? But when we desegregate the data, aggregate the data, and looking at subgroups of Asian Americans, Southeast Asians and Pacific Islanders are way more likely than other Asian groups to be incarcerated, and their numbers are really high comparable to Blacks and Latinos. So when people are looking at the whole group, a lot of Asian Americans are getting invisibilized. And part of that is, if we know a lot of Asian Americans are Southeast Asians are coming over during escaping war-torn countries and more likely to be in communities that are low SES class. So another thing is within our community, like you mentioned, Candy, the shame piece, right? There's a lot of shame. You don't do things to shame your own, your community or your family. So being incarcerated is a big shame to our families. So that don't get talked about. I remember many times where my mom would be like, if anyone asks, just say that your older brother moves out of state for work every time he gets incarcerated, because there was so much shame in this. So because of the shame where we as Asian Americans have, we're not out there fighting for this injustice. We are suffering in silence because we don't want other people to know, because if we're out there, we're fighting for it, then that means there's this fear that other people are like, are you not shameful? Why are you bringing this up and letting the world know that your son or your family member has been incarcerated? So that takes away a lot of the resources and the work that we need to do as a community.
Yeah, well, the model minority keeps struggling. AAPI is invisible and denies the support that they need, right? So when we're really looking at some of the mass incarceration of invisible communities, I think the Asian American Pacific Islander community is one of those, and then as well as the Mensa community, right, which is the Arab, Middle Eastern, South Asians, those communities that who are also impacted, right? And so when we're looking at that, we have to look at what Timmy was just talking about, how the United States foreign policy has created a lot of those devastations globally, right? Especially in many of the countries that they utilize as battleground and proxy wars that they want to fight in the name of democracy, right? And so what happened with that is that you create a lot of refugees, right? Then you ask them to make choices whether they want to fight against their own people or they fight alongside the United States or the Europeans. And when that happens, then when they allow refugees, when they feel like it to allow refugees to come to this country, guess where those people are relocated at? In many of the people of color community who historically, living in poverty, living in violence, right? And so then hence that pipeline. And so that's one key piece. I think that ultimately is that piece that continues to ties back to anti-Blackness, that who is conditioned and perpetuated by white supremacy and the system of racism. I mean, if we even for a second disconnect ourselves in all the struggle, all the fights that we're fighting on many fronts, for a second, if we're forgetting that white supremacy and the system of the institution of racism is the condition that created all this, I think then we'll continue to be divided and conquered. And that's why we need to really focus on how do we not lose sight of cross-cultural healing, and then utilize the principle of restorative justice and transformative justice to build racial solidarity so that we can all win and we can all not be afraid to take power.
Yes. Speaking so much wisdom here, everybody. So important. I'm looking at time. We're a little bit over. I don't know if we want to get to Kim to ask the next question, unless somebody really wants to answer this one, or we can get to the next question. All right, Kim.
Okay. So I want to jump to this question, and then after this question's answered, move to answering questions from the audience so we can make sure that those questions get answered as well. This has been an amazing panel. So I want to ask, how is SB 1437 and the fight to end mass incarceration connected to deportations, especially within Haitian, Cambodian, and forgive me, I believe it's Laotian communities? If you all want to chime in and talk about those connections, that would be so great.
Can I start? Am I on mute?
We can hear you, sis.
Oh, okay. I'm on two different things. So I have my oldest son, he's married with 2 children, and my daughter-in-law is Cambodian. She's first generation here. She has 11 brothers. Her parents, one of her brothers was born in the concentration camp in Thailand on their way from making it from Cambodia to here. Once they got here, then they obviously have some children that are American citizens and some that are not. One of her brothers got into some trouble here, and he has been in Cambodia, sent back by himself without any family. I want to say 10 years. I think that's huge, and what a lot of Asian Americans are facing. It's not just getting in trouble and then facing over sentencing. You're getting in trouble, you're facing all these other obstacles, and then you're being sent back to a country that you don't even remember being in, and your family's here. And that has a huge effect on families. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what this has done to my daughter's family, but just imagine having a piece of you. It's just one component of your family. And no matter how big or small your family is, each component is necessary and it's vital. And when you take one piece, it affects the entire family in so many ways. And that's mental health. That's it's everything. And so that's a huge thing that I see happening for Asian Americans.
Eddie, I'm gonna let you take it, but before Eddie goes, Google Chinese Exclusion Act, and you will see America's modern immigration policies.
Yeah, well, the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act definitely is one of those racist policy that, that can really relate to a lot of many of our communities of colors. But I do wonder, Jamie brings up a good point about the separation of family, but unfortunately the 1437 allows people to be able to get resentenced and get out. But it has no connection towards to the immigration policies, right, when it comes to dealing with deportation. And unfortunately, but the whole idea is to get people free first, right? And then once they're free, then hopefully we'll continue to fight for their freedom. And one of the connections dealing with the mass incarceration with the deportation is the 1996 IRA bill that was passed by Congress, right, which is the illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996. That bill passed, really expanded, right, the ways how they can detain people and deport people if they are not citizens of the United States. So, part of the law states that anyone who is not a citizen of the United States who has committed a crime of aggravated felony or crime of moral turpitude, they are automatically detained and deported. And the law is retroactive. Now, you would think, you're talking about retroactivity, they should get the African Americans their 40 acres and a mule, right, retroactively, right, since they haven't done it. You would think that there's a lot of things that they do retroactively to help to get repatriation for the people they have harmed, but they don't. But when it comes to the law, they'll make it convenient to continue to separate families, continue to do double punishment, and that is okay, right? So when it comes to the Southeast Asian community, I talk about the war, the imperialistic war that's happening and taking place in other people's land, and that's not just in Southeast Asia, right? We can see that happening right now in the Middle East, right? But since 1998, 15,000 Cambodians have received deportation orders, right? And so, but then just this year, with this outgoing, not fast enough administration, they really threatened threatened the Laotians, right? And also the Vietnamese folks who came, to this country, right, as refugees. And they try to expand those type of deportations that will continue to separate our families. And so that's why we have to connect mass incarceration and deportation, because it impacts Black immigrants, right? It impacts all immigrants, So people, before when we talk about comprehensive immigration reform, it's a Latinx issue, but it's not. It's all about the issue, right? And so once we tie those intersectionality together, there's no choice but for us to have racial solidarity to continue to fight for each other.
Thank you so much, Eddie. I was just getting ready to type in the chat. I appreciate you saying that. I know early on when I first came to understand immigration better, I think it was like 2010 to between 2010 and 2012, yeah, this nation framed it as a Latinx thing, right? Like it was just Latinx folks immigrating here, but that's not true because we have destabilized nations in the Middle East. We've destabilized nations in Africa, right? We've destabilized nations all over the place. And because of that, we are seeing the results of what the horrors, the war crimes we've committed have led people to flood to our borders. And we really need to be opening them up and letting them in, right? And so it's not a Latinx thing. Immigration is Black, immigration looks Asian, immigration looks like Pacific Islanders, immigration looks like all of these things and all of these people. And so we do well to connect all of that and not to see it as, just a certain group's issues, because it's our issue as well. So I want to thank everyone. This has been an amazing panel. I was texting Candy like, y'all chose the best panelists. I think this was an amazing fit. I'm grateful for all that you've shared with us. And now I'm going to ask if you all would be willing to answer the questions of our participants who were listening in today. So I'm going to combine two of these questions, because one asks, why has it been so hard for SB 1437 to move forward in San Diego? And then another question asks, how can folks in the community uplift the work of SB 1437? So I feel like those two can be answered together if any of our panelists want to tackle that.
We're in the Freedom and Justice Coalition.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be working, and we're right now working on the best suitable campaign. Things are changing quickly because there's so many cases in the Supreme Court. So each case has something specific about the bill that it needs clarity on. We will be running a campaign on the district attorney. So follow Asian Solidarity Collective and the Freedom and Justice Coalition on their page, and there'll be coming information.
I completely agree with Layla and following what we're doing, but also taking any opportunity you can to explain what SB 1437 is to other people, because right now it's kind of people are uneducated in what it is, and all they're hearing is you're setting murderers free, and this isn't the case. And so this is why we're bringing these four amazing people to the forefront and using their situations and their cases and sharing their hearts and their families' hearts with you, and to give you a better understanding of what SB 1437 was passed for, who it was passed for, who it's affecting. So educate other people as well.
Beautiful, thank you. We had a question from Tasha, which I think is an excellent question. What resources are available for people being released? She says, I want people released and provided services so they're successful, right? So that speaks to recidivism. When people re-enter society, they're finally released from cages. They don't have what they need to land on their feet and move through this world the way that they should be able to. And so she said here that the DA is not lacking resources, which we know, right? And law enforcement ain't either. Thank you for pointing that out, Tasha. Neither are the courts. Funding needs to be reallocated from the above entities to the communities who lack these things generally. So what resources are available for those being released, and how do we get those folks access to those resources?
As always, Tasha has made the statement and answered the question with her genius self that there's funding issues. There always has been. Our country, our county, our city is not interested in funding reentry. They're interested in funding prisons. And that's why there's an article that says, don't go to Yale, become a California corrections officer, because with the high school diploma, you can make 6 figures.
Thank you, Layla. Candy, do you want to take the next two?
Sure. Well, there's an important question here around where do we go from here? How can we as family members support the movement to hold these people accountable to what they should? I feel like some of this has been answered, but if there's anything specific around this, what should have been done and what should they do moving forward? And then the next question, we could put it in two folds. Most of the cases held up tonight are boys and men. Are girls and women impacted by felony murder, gang enhancements in the same way, but just fewer? Or are there different strategies and forces used against women and femmes?
Actually, while we were lobbying and advocating for SB 1437, even before it had a bill number, it was called the Me Too bill, because this is one of the predominant ways they sentence young Black and Latino women to life, because it's a non-killer bill. So that's when you're in the car with your boyfriend and he goes to rob the liquor store, something happens, and you have 25 to life. So the majority of women that were in prison were in there because of felony murder and the aiding and abetting felony murder. Jakia Holiday is currently serving 15 to life in California prison. She was homeless. She was asleep in the backseat of her boyfriend's car, and they say someone did a drive-by, and she was the natural and probable consequence. And she pled. They said they were going to give her first-degree murder, so she pled to second degree. Hopefully, she's eligible for SB 1437. So women have been dynamically affected by these unjust bills and are coming home too.
I just wanted to say that this is what I do. I go through files. I look at files that have included any gang enhancement cases. Women are definitely impacted. Not anywhere, and this is not taking away from that. We need to pay attention to the women, of course, all just as much. But their sentences are lighter. They aren't prosecuted, and to the extent that you see, and this is not my opinion, I'm stating actual facts from cases here in San Diego. They're not generally sentenced as harshly. Their conviction, the penal codes that they end up with are usually a little bit lighter, but they are definitely being faced with the same issues. And we should.
Those are gang enhancements. So there's definitely a difference with Jamie saying. Felony murder and natural probable consequences was a Me Too bill. Gang enhancements, women are not as affected, but with felony murder, SB 1437, they are. That's a Me Too bill, and there's tons of women who have been released and who are in the pipeline to coming home.
I apologize. I should have made it clear that the cases that I was referring to were murder cases. So the ones that I'm thinking of in my head were murder cases. They were people who could have been, hit with the felony murder, women who could have been hit with the felony murder rule, but didn't, and they shouldn't have been. And so I'm glad that they weren't. Sorry.
That's no worries. We had Tara Brown come out of LA, lift her up, y'all. She went to prison for 20 years for sitting in a car while somebody went and robbed a store. Every story you hear about these young girls, from Satoya Brown to Sarah Cruzan, are felony murder stories. They've all been convicted of felony murder. So all the women that you're hearing about, they were prostitutes and they went and they killed the trick, that's felony murder. They say they robbed them and killed them. That's felony murder. And so those are the stories we're fighting. The next girl who's in this other place they're trying to give life, this other Black girl who was prostituted, raped, molested, ended up killing the trick who was raping her, they're trying to convict her of felony murder. Sarah Cruzan did 16 years for killing her pimp who started pimping her at 13. That was felony murder. Toya Brown, same thing, felony murder. Y'all fight. Let's fight like our lives depended on it.
Yes.
It's unfair.
Yes. Thank you, Layla. One last question. I see two questions that were pulled from Facebook, but I believe they were already answered. It says that now that the law passed, why are they not following the law? So that was talked about earlier on. So if you're the person that answered that question, I would just recommend that once the live is over, play it back, because they did talk about that a lot towards the beginning. But the next question is, for those of you who have loved ones who are incarcerated right now, Clarissa wants to know, are they going to have any visiting soon at the prisons, and considering everything that's going on with COVID?
What they're...
Go ahead, sis. You got this.
Layla and I are fighting for answers here. No, what they're doing right now is they're implementing video visitation, and that will consist of one 30-minute video visit for each person incarcerated per month. They just started, I think they did a trial run at 5 different facilities in California, and they were having some technical difficulties with the video equipment that they brought. So they had to cancel all of those. But by the end of December, they are supposed to have all this equipment in every facility in California for one 30-minute call per month. And yeah, that's it. So no physical visits that I know of. You know anything different, Layla? Layla usually is way more ahead of getting the information than I am.
Well, you've been beating me on the CDCR stuff lately, sis. You've been helping me out with the stuff you've been posting, but exactly what you said is what I heard. Thank you. Hopefully I get a video visit soon.
Thank you for sharing that. What about, Eddie, I want to ask you, what about like nationally? Have you heard what visits look like at different prisons across the US right now?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but I do want to say that, you know, just in California, right, we have about 115, 120,000 people who are incarcerated. And if you think about how many family members of those incarcerated, you just times 2, right? That just double the number. And those numbers, we should be voting, right? We should be talking to the legislators, demanding them to release people, demanding them to do the right thing, demanding to follow the law, right? The policy that's being passed. Because that's not only saving lives, but you know, it's also saving taxpayer money, right? Which their money, right? And so I think that's where with the free to vote, that's a very important piece, right? With the recent win on the free to vote, you know, where formerly incarcerated folks have the rights to vote, right? But then the conservative and the right wings, they continue to push back, and they have more resources. But you can't beat people power, right? You cannot beat people power. But if we don't organize and we don't get connected and fight back, then we'll continue to be at a disadvantage and continue to suffer from that.
Thank you so much. You cannot beat people power. Don't y'all ever forget it. Because I don't care who we go up against, y'all. I don't care how much money they have. The power of the people, we're the 99, y'all. There's more of us than there are of them. They're the 1%. They're the ruling class. That last thing they want to see is all of us join together in solidarity, cross-racial, right? Overthrow them. They don't want that. That's their worst nightmare. But we can do it. But we got to be willing to commit to this work. So I want to thank everyone. I urge y'all to plug into Asian Solidarity Collective. I urge you to plug into Pillars. That's my political home. That's where I throw down. Those are my folks. And tap into other folks you know doing the work. Candy posted a few orgs in here that were mentioned earlier. I know the Eddie's organization we talked about Revolve. Like, plug into these orgs that are doing work. Find your political home in this time, y'all. Your political home is a place where they are working on the issues that you care about, and you can go there to get sharpened, right? We need other people to help sharpen us, but also lean into abolition. Don't shy away from it. Everyone's number one thing is, oh my God, but if we close prisons, the rapists, the murderers, no, that's indoctrination. We have watched too much cops. We've watched too much Law and Order. They have us believing that everyone's a serial killer. Everyone's a rapist. Let me tell you, there are people with badges and uniforms that are raping people right now. I was just reading another article about a police officer who was caught raping women, right? There are rapists walking on our streets right now. Rapists aren't just sitting in prisons. You know what I'm saying? We have to stop the conditions that lead people to that. And typically, most times it's trauma. So we need to address those things, right? We got to abolish prisons. Don't get caught up in the fallacy of everyone's a serial killer in there, everyone's a murderer. That's not true. People are in there for property crimes. And we got to start talking about that. We have to get real serious about that and do the work. We have to decolonize the way that we think. We got to create those alternatives to policing, y'all. We can do it. How do I know? People like Mental Health First SAC, CAT 911 out of LA, Orange County, Riverside, Mental Health First SAC, Mental Health First in Oakland. These folks are responding to crises without police, and everyone's walking away safe at the end of the day. We can do that. I want to thank my family, both Pillars and Asian Solidarity Collective for asking me to moderate with my boo, my ride or die, Dr. DJ Cutting Candy, the people's DJ. It's been such a blast and a pleasure. All of our panelists are amazing, and I'm going to stop now because I feel like I have talked a lot, but I have thoroughly enjoyed this panel. It's been a blast, and I'm looking forward to replay it back because I was jotting down notes in my phone and stuff. So this has been amazing, and I love y'all.
Yes, oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Kim, for joining us, all our panelists. Please stay on because we are going to take a photo as we do some tie up some closing wrap-ups and lifting up some things to come. But appreciate y'all. Thank you so much for lifting up the cross-racial solidarity needed. I think it really ties back to abolition, because if we really want solidarity, as Dr. Dylan Rodriguez often says, abolition is a moral obligation. So if we really truly are in solidarity, then abolition should be the pathway to our liberation. I really believe that. So appreciate everybody, to Eddie Zhang, to Layla Aziz, to Jamie Wilson, to Dr. Timito, and also for Kim Moore, for just being here and sharing all your wisdom, experience, and knowledge, and love and care that you've given to this. Yes, lifting up the Freedom and Justice campaign. We are just launching. I also want to lift up the Asian Prisoners Support Committee, which Eddie was also a part of as well, who have been long doing this work long before us, and other folks like Freedom Inc., as well as MN8, and specifically in Asian communities that have been doing this for a long time, including CRAC as folks. So now I'm going to turn this over to our Asian Solidarity Collective folks who are going to take us into announcements. Please stay on for photos. I know we've gone a little bit over time, but we'll wrap things up. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thanks again for a great panel discussion, you all. We truly learned a lot. A big thanks to our panelists and speakers, and the Candy and Kim for moderating such an important dialogue. Before we end, we just want to share some next steps with y'all. It's been mentioned that you can follow Asian Solidarity Collective and Pillars on social media and join our email list. You can tell your friends and family about this. You can sign and share petitions for Donald, Brian, and other incarcerated community members. And you can get ready to turn out to hold DA Stephen accountable.
Thanks, Kevin. We have some really exciting upcoming events for Asian Solidarity Collective as well. Our membership orientation is on Sunday, December 13th from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. So thank you to our panelists and our moderators for uplifting the work we're doing. Now is a great time to be an Asian Solidarity Collective member. You can RSVP at bit.ly/ASC membership. And we also are having an open mic night, ASC's Portal to Liberation, Building Poetic Possibilities. This will be a virtual open mic night hosted by Grace Shin-Hye-jun and Kendrick Dial, featuring Viet Mai and Ant Black. That will be Friday, December 11th, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. So we're asking the question, what does a world free from a police state look like? What do you envision as a path to liberation? What is your response to the world that we're currently in now? So we're accepting poetry, songs, if you want to do some short story or monologue, just reflecting on the poetic possibilities of this time as part of our Portal to Liberation campaign. And you can RSVP for that if you either want to watch or be a part of the actual open mic night at asiansolidarity@gmail.com. We encourage you to also join ASC's mailing list and become a member today. You can find out more about Asian Solidarity Collective on our website, www.asiansolidaritycollective.org, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and that's just at Asian Solidarity Collective. Once again, ASC would like to thank all of the phenomenal speakers and panelists. What an incredible conversation to be a part of. And thank you so much to our accessibility team for the care you gave to providing accessibility for folks. We hope that this is a reminder for all of us about the importance of accessibility so we can continue to center disability justice in our organizing work. We're super, super grateful to all of the amazing ASC volunteers and our entire Asian Solidarity Collective membership and supporters. Thank you so much for being here today.
And then lastly, we want to thank all of you, our audience. Please stay tuned, especially as we continue the Freedom Justice campaign, our Portal to Liberation campaign, and more. Thanks all.
Yay, everybody. Thank you. And now everyone, we're going to take a group photo. I don't know if Stacy and Carmela are on. I know there are photo takers, either or. Some of you might not be able to put
Let me fix my hair.
Yes.
We all fit. You look great, Jamie.
Yeah. Can we
Yeah.
throw gang signs?
Yes.
I can't see us all.
Yeah. What's this?
Change the view to gallery. Oh, I see us all.
Yeah.
Mia and Darren, and Jessica, thank you so much. You're all welcome to join us in this photo. If not, it's okay. Anyone else, if you don't want to be.
Eddie, I got to get you on some more stuff. You be putting it down. Down. I should have known though.
Yeah, I'll do it too. Okay, are we all here? Who's taking the photo? Stacy or Carmela? Either or.
I'll do it.
I'm assigning.
I'm the photo guy. So, all right, just like pose, and I'm gonna take a couple, and then I'll send out options for y'all for wherever you feel cute. So yeah, just smile, and I'm gonna take a bunch. Oh, hold on, let me close some windows so it doesn't look weird. Okay.
Oh, Piggy has ears. I love it.
It was the yes on the gang signs, right?
Yep. Toss it up, sis.
What up?
Okay, I'm gonna do one. Oh wait, hold on. Ah, no. Don't
might get documented that my son can't live with me.
Okay. Yeah. Let me do this before people start saying things in the chat. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, they can hear us still?
Oh wait, no, somebody just commented.